So, good morning all. Thank you for being here. I'm Julien, one of the three co-founders at Argent. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all for Abstract Istanbul, a full day dedicated to account abstraction. And I hope the first one of a series of conference on the topic. First of all, I want to thank all our sponsors, and more specifically Starknet, zkSync, and Clave. They've been onboarded from the start when we came up with that idea, and so it's been great building that with them. And I also want to thank the Argent team, who has been working relentlessly to make sure this day would be amazing and productive. So as an introduction, by the way, I have a message from Uri, the CEO of Starknet, who would like to apologize for not being here. As you know, the situation is a bit chaotic right now, and so his team couldn't join, and he couldn't join, but they were certainly very excited for this day. So as an intro for the conference, I wanted to talk a little bit about my own personal journey through account abstraction. And as you know, Argent, we started in 2018 with the idea of using smart contract as accounts, so programmable accounts. And we did that because we really believe it was the only way to onboard billions of users on blockchain. And at the time, we only talk about smart contract wallet or smart wallet. To be honest, I had never heard of the term account abstraction. The first time I heard about account abstraction was in 2020 when Vitalik posted the IP 2938. The idea was to introduce a new type of transaction, account abstraction transaction, to make smart contract behave like top-level accounts. And to be fair, I selfishly didn't like the idea. We had, spent the two previous years building an architecture around meta-transaction relayer to make sure a smart contract could behave like account, and suddenly Vitalik has a new ID and everybody should benefit for it for free. I selfishly was really not happy. A year and a half later came the IP 4337. And actually for me, that's where I would say account abstractions kind of clicked it. The first reason is that ERC 4337 tries to bring account abstraction at the application level. And if you look at it, it's exactly the Argent model we had been built and using for 2 years. The only difference is that ERC 4337 is a standard to decentralize the meta-transaction and relayer part, but in the end, it's exactly the Argent model. So I started to realize if ERC 4337 is account abstraction, that kind of means we've been doing account abstraction from the start. And so that kind of opened my perspective. The other thing is that I realized with ERC 4337 that actually by it being at the application layer, it wasn't really an improvement on the Argent model. And back then, we had identified some of the limitations of our model. The main one was that we were building on a chain that was designed for EOAs. And so what I realized with ERC 4337 is that actually we would not succeed alone to get rid of EOAs, which I believe should be a goal of account abstraction. And so at that point, I started to embrace account abstraction as a global narrative. And so about a year later, that was the first DevConnect in Amsterdam, I was invited to talk at Layer 2 Amsterdam, a conference dedicated to Layer 2s. And of course, by then I was really bullish on account abstraction. And I also had realized that, as I mentioned, I think account abstraction should happen at the protocol level. Programmable accounts should really be the default model, first-class citizen on chains. And so, since I was talking to an audience of Layer 2s, I kind of pitched the narrative that Layer 2s should really launch with native account abstraction. 2022, for me, was kind of the rise of Layer 2s, and I really felt that we were at the tipping point. We were starting with a blank page because we were trying to bring users from Layer 1 to Layer 2s. We had learned a lot of things on the VM, which is an amazing VM, but we had also identified some of the limitations, such as the account model. So I really started pitching about let's make sure Layer 2 starts with native account abstraction. And so I pitched that in Amsterdam, and actually for a year and a half, that's the only thing I could talk about. I would go to every single conference talking about account abstraction, up to a point that people started, making a meme of myself on Twitter, and some of them I thought were quite funny. But actually going to all these conferences and talking to all these people made me want to bring all these people to the same room. I felt that, account abstraction is an amazing design space. There's many ways to implement it, depending on the specifics of every VM that you may use. And so I really wanted to bring all the stakeholders of account abstraction in the larger EVM ecosystem, Ethereum ecosystem, together in one place to just discuss and exchange. And that really was the starting point of the idea for this conference. And so I'm really, really looking forward and excited about the discussion, the panels that we will all have today. And before I leave the stage to the first panel, which I'm excited to hear about, I wanted to say one more thing. A lot of people have asked me for the past 2 years, why am I so passionate about account abstraction? And for me, the main reason is that I do believe it's the only way to save self-custody. I think self-custody is one of the amazing properties of blockchain. But it is very hard in practice for normal users. The user experience of self-custody and security on blockchain is really complicated. And because of that, the majority of users that have crypto today are actually using centralized solution. And I think this is a fail on ourselves, the ecosystem. And so we really need to come with solution such that users can, use blockchain, use the benefit of blockchain without compromising on self-custody. And I do believe that account abstraction is the only way to achieve that. And with this, I would like to thank you again and hope that you'll have a pleasant and very productive day. Thank you.
Welcome to the flavor of account abstraction. I'm sure it's going to be tasty. Okay, so first of all, let's do an intro. I'm Ray from 7X Ventures. We're a very research-driven venture capital. Yeah, Marcin.
Hi, I'm Marcin. I'm working on ZK. I'm working for Matter Labs, working on the ZK.
Hi, my name is Keng. I'm from Taiko. We are a Type 1 ZK rollup.
Hey everyone, my name's Joe. We're a privacy-focused L2 on Ethereum.
Hi, I'm Bobbin. I'm from Polygon and specifically working on the Polygon Miden.
I'm Nick. Can you guys see me? Yeah? Yes.
I think so.
Yep. Okay, there we go. Yeah, knew it. I'm Nick, the CEO of Fuel. We're building a layer 2 that's scalability and sort of more or less TPS focused for Ethereum.
Cool. So today we got 50 minutes. Plenty of times. So I want to start about a joke. We were talking about our fear about Web3 at the backstage. I think both of us we have a really terrible experience with Web3. Marcin, what's your worst nightmare about it?
The worst nightmare?
Yeah, about Web3.
Oh, that's so scary. I don't even want to talk about it. But more seriously, and this is I think the feeling that many of us have, is that there are moments where in Web3, we have fear. We look at the thing, we know we have to sign it.
Yeah.
We're not fully sure. But then with a little bit of a sweat, we click, it's signed. Okay, safe. So this is a little bit of I was comparing it to visit a dentist. It's from time to time you have to go and do it. You know it's going to be painful, but you have to do it. And hopefully, we can do something. We can do better.
The dentist is a good one.
Yeah, I think pretty much the same thing, the fear of signing some random transactions that will lose you all your funds. And also, as a developer myself, I need to keep track of so many different private keys when deploying new decentralized applications. So, yeah, managing all these private keys is a fear for me.
Yeah, I think for me, along the same vein, not having the blockchain enforce rules about which transactions I could sign and having to trust off-chain code to do that, it feels a bit scary.
I would say there are probably 2 fears and one, not fear, but an inconvenience point. So the 2 fears are related to security, right? I'm concerned that maybe I'll lose my kind of wallet seed phrase and my phone gets crashed and backup somewhere is lost, or somebody steals, or I get compromised in some ways. And as much as I'd like to think that I'm careful and do all the things correctly, you never know. And I'm freaking out that somebody's going to drain my wallets or whatever. And the inconvenience is mostly around privacy because I don't want to be public as much as possible. So how can I obscure the flow of funds? I get paid, I pay for things. I right now use centralized exchange as a mixer, which is not the best thing.
Yeah.
So those are kind of my fears and inconveniences around Web3.
Well, I've been doing crypto for too long, and I've aged significantly doing this whole crypto thing. And the main thing that has bothered me has been everything is horrible. Literally, the entire thing is a disaster. It's been such a horrible time going from very early Ethereum now to what it is even now, because even as it gets better, it's still horrible. So there's like a huge lack of any sort of regard for the user at all, and it's basically an impossible experience typically for most people on planet Earth. Yeah.
These guys are like founders and core members of Layer 2s.
Yeah.
Have fears for like experience. That really sucks, right? So I feel like this whole panel or the conference about user experience sucks, right? We all know that. But like, why is that? Because the validity rule of Ethereum is fixed right now. You need a single key to generate a signature, and you to pay the right gas fee for the corresponding network. And the nonce, you need to put the transaction one by one in order, which is like so inconvenient and introduce a lot of terrible experience. But like, how can we fix it? So before we starting this, I feel like a lot of my friends come up to me was like, what is account abstraction? What is smart account? What is smart contract account? What is EOA account? Okay, that is very confusing. Each one of you, maybe in your white paper, you use different terms. But like, I think we can make it super clear. That is, account abstraction is basically about changing the validity rule to be more programmable, that you can use arbitrary assigner, for example, multi-sigs, or session keys, or let other to pay your gas fee, or pay ERC20, or enable the transaction in parallel. So I think right now we have like two really popular approaches. One is contract level for 7, as they mentioned, and the other one is the protocol level, right? So, Marcin, do you want to start from the protocol level support?
Right. So the main point is that one advantage of being an L2 is that we're able to start later, which means you can actually observe the problems that L1 had. And to be fair, Ethereum did an amazing job. I agree with you here, Nick, that not many things changed, but this is partially because not many things had to change. Ethereum is still super successful even without these things. Of course, we can say it would have been so much better if they were changed, but still, it went forward. Now, the ability to look at Ethereum and see the pitfalls and try to do our best to design is actually two benefits. So one of them is we can try different things. You're going to hear different approaches of how account abstraction can be done. And it's also a good signal for Ethereum on which one of them they can actually migrate into L1. So the way to think about it, we are like this, front scouts running before the main army, trying to see what's good, what's bad.
Yeah.
Now, for the concrete account abstraction design, so the decision we did on MATLABs on ZK Sync is, yes, we kind of embedded it in. It's still very similar to 4337 when it comes to, we're going to probably talk a lot more about that, like limitations, designs, like the whole structure of, yes, you have like account interface, you validate, etc. You have paymaster. So this is still similar. Someone who actually went through these 32 pages of 43337. The question: how many of you did read 4337, like until the end? Okay, wow, impressive. Thank you. So for people who went, if they look at the ZK Sync implementation, they will see the similarities. At the same time, and we'll talk more about this later, like implementing it is painful. It's hard. It actually breaks a lot of assumptions that you would not have to think about if not for this. So the protocol code would have been far more simpler if not for these cases. But, I hope that it will be worth it, and we'll see. Thank you.
Okay. What's your defense about 427 instead of protocol level?
Yeah, so on Taiko, we are able to implement 4337 on the contract level. So going back to my point of Taiko being a type 1 ZK EVM, it means that we are Ethereum equivalent, and any smart contracts you deploy on Ethereum can also work on Taiko as is, right? So that means all necessary components of account abstraction that has been deployed on Ethereum, such as your entry point, paymaster, aggregator, and your smart account contract, all can be deployed on Taiko as is. So this means we sort of can just inherit the already built account abstraction protocols such as Gnosis Safe, Particle Network, and maybe Web3 Auth if they integrate us. Yeah, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to. We just get these account abstraction on board onto Taiko. Yeah, but I would say that the downside is that because we are using like a legacy tech, we can't really change what is bad about these. So I think the current 4337 contract level 4337, it adds some overhead to executing transactions, but that's why we are a rollup, right? To reduce gas costs. Yeah, so I think that will be my stance.
Yeah, for Aztec, we take a different approach, and so we kind of remove all EOAs and bake everything into the protocol. So every smart contract on Aztec can be an account. The authentication for every function is defined by the developers. I think the reason for this is when I look at 4337, I think of it as like Google Translate. You can have a conversation with someone with Google Translate, but it's not a very good conversation. You can maybe get your transaction on chain, you can maybe order some food at a bar, but if you try and do anything kind of in depth and discuss something like on this panel through Google Translate, you don't get very far. So if you want to really take accounts and make them integrate with Web 2, have things like WebAuthn, RSA signatures that the rest of the internet uses, you need a much more powerful set of tools than Google Translate. And I think there's a lot of limitations with 4337 that prevent that. I think specifically the overhead of a transaction that someone else has to execute is the main one.
So with Miden, we have a very similar approach. Basically, there is just an account, and every account has code, and every account has storage, and like there is no different types of accounts where there's no distinction between EOAs or smart contracts. Everything is a smart contract, and users are free to deploy whatever code they want in their accounts, and that's how it works. So it's basically built in at the protocol level. And as others here said, basically it unlocks more functionality. Like it's at the protocol level, it's just much easier when you have a green field to design. I mean, there's pluses and minuses, but the big plus is that you can support anything you can think of, and you can incorporate like the learnings from from everybody who came before you. So that's a huge advantage. I think, as comparing like doing it at the protocol level in Ethereum, I think there's probably like a philosophical thought. Like if you think about a philosophical distinction, if you believe that most of the innovation should happen on L2, like you would say maybe Ethereum core protocol doesn't need to change things a lot. Mm-hmm. Maybe it should be like very, very simple, and even if it's limited to some extent. And then on L2s, whether it's EVM or non-EVM based L2, you can extend EVM or have some totally kind of new on the green field. And that's like a really kind of, I think, philosophical decision whether you believe L1 should be more ossified or not, and basically not change as much.
Yeah, so for Fuel, we have our own transaction model, and we basically have three kinds of entities, you could say. So we have EOAs, we have smart contracts, but we also have a very odd thing called predicates. Those are spending conditions, and those are effectively our native level account abstraction. So that allows you to very freely create whatever you want for your signing conditions, effectively. And that's just a script. If the script returns true, then you can spend. It's primarily designed the way that it is and not a smart contract because Fuel tries to reduce state and state growth as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So we try to provide the developer as many ways to not use state as possible, which we believe is like a much more sustainable way to do blockchains in the, even in the short term, state is overwhelming. So for our side, right now we can support everything from native Ethereum style signing all the way over to Cosmos wallet signing, or as I'll present soon, WebAuthn signing, and effectively you can do whatever kind of signature scheme you want or whatever kind of smart contract wallet you want. It's just we have a distinction between smart contract wallets and these sort of single state element predicates that we use. So we give the developer both. If you want to make a smart contract wallet, totally fine. But the prioritization is on predicates for sure in our system to do everything.
Yeah, indeed. Instead of the layer 1 that taking the step to like optimize, the layer 2 definitely is a better place to start, right? So what do you think, like, are there like many challenges when you implement the native support and also like for 7 support? Like, what's the biggest challenge for you?
So there are a lot. The big challenges show up around people breaking account abstractions in different contracts without even noticing.
Okay.
A good example is you have some contracts saying like, okay, cool, but I need to do an EC recover on the signature. And you're like, yeah, but it's account abstraction. Like, you cannot depend on that. Mm-hmm. Because suddenly, like, basically many contracts that exist today on Ethereum have assumptions that account abstraction doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. So this is one. Second meta thing that I think will be shared by many people here is the DDoS attack vector. Mm-hmm. You will see that in 457, like half of a page, or maybe more, maybe like 2 pages, are explaining all the conditions that you can and cannot do in order to do this pre-verification of whether account abstraction is correct. Yeah. Yes, if it can be done fully stateless, like on Fuel, awesome. But very soon people are like, yeah, stateless is not enough. I want to access a little bit of state. A little bit of state of my account, and actually, also a little bit of state of ECR20 from some other account, and maybe something like people slowly start coming up with more exciting and crazy cases, good assumptions of like, yes, we want this because our users want it. Mm-hmm. But all these things mean that suddenly like this balance between, hey, what is the risk of us allowing it and therefore opening the gates towards some DDoS attack where someone will just fill the blockchain with requests that will pass the first verification, but then when added to chain will fail. That's always the scary part. And we don't have a good definition of where this border is right now. So it's going back and forth when it comes to like people between us and implementing protocol and people implementing the account abstraction. So
yeah, you gotta find the balance. Okay.
Yeah. So for Taiko, I guess the problems are being solved by the people building the account abstraction protocols, and not really us. Yeah. So nothing much to say here.
Yeah, I think we've got, and maybe with Miden as well, some more unique constraints. So for us, account abstraction doesn't just mean signing fees and nonces. As a privacy-focused L2, we're also trying to abstract encryption. If you enshrine that at the protocol, a user doesn't have agency of how they discover their private state. So we spent a lot of effort trying to work out how, when I'm paying, say, Bobbin, I can encrypt notes just for him, and his wallet can make that decision for him. And there's lots of different private information retrieval schemes that you may pick that have a range of trade-offs similar to different signing schemes. So being able to abstract that has been kind of the main focus of our account abstraction work over recent kind of weeks. And it's some weird king of the hill problems where if I call out to Bobbin's contract and say, hey, how do you want to receive your notes? I'm involving untrusted code in the execution of my transaction, and he could maybe have that fail. And it creates a range of attacks that kind of weren't possible in standard account abstraction. But we think we've got some solutions, so that's been the main challenge for us recently.
Yep. So I would say kind of like when you start with like greenfield, like the main question is like, what do you want to kind of like, what restrictions do you want to put in place? Because you don't, sky's the limit. And at the same time, you do want to kind of optimize for some things, because if you just say everything is super generic, like you will not, like it may not be super optimal in some contexts. So you need to kind of pick and choose like, which restrictions you put, and this is not trivial. So like we've made some choices about how the account abstraction works, and these choices may yield more optimal kind of like use cases, but for some use cases maybe we didn't consider. So like figuring out which use cases will be enabled and which use cases will be stifled by the choices that we've made, like that's kind of like one of the more tricky things. I would say the DDoS or just DOS vector is a big thing that we're thinking about. In the privacy context, there is a bit of a difference there, because at least like in the way we're thinking about things that are proven locally, because you can prove a transaction locally on Miden. We're not too concerned about DDoS vector, because like as soon as you send it to the network, they can verify the proof, and if the proof verification fails, they know the transaction is not valid. But we want to have a model where you can have your private state interact with the public state and or shared state on the chain, and in that context, DOS attacks are very much real. And we have some ideas, but it is still in the process of figuring out like what's the best way to prevent somebody from creating a transaction that somebody executes and it fails at the last moment, or like will impose significant computational burden on somebody and may not be that easy to extract like fees from whoever caused the failure.
Yeah, I mean, Fuel has its own transaction model and its own UTXO-style system for processing everything. So for us, we don't have any nonces. Yeah. Anything like that. You just spend whatever UTXOs you have or you want. In general, though, I think there's a lot of challenges in terms of how contracts and how people conceive of what account abstraction might be for a user. And the main thing is you just want the user to not have to go through hell to use your thing. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, in the way that everything's currently constructed, at least from 4337's perspective, it's very band-aided in terms of how this is all put together, and the user is going to lose a lot of what I would say potentially alleviating user experience things if it was just designed more to the protocol in a nicer way. So just to start that conversation, at the protocol level, it's so much better. I mean, you basically can just do what the user needs in that user experience flow so that they can get the job done and complete the transactions and have the properties you're looking for. I think I think Ethereum really needs to probably hard fork and do something more substantial than 4337 to really address the issue. And native level is so much better. And like even for Aztec, like I wouldn't want to use some weird 4337 thing over Aztec, for example. Like I just want Aztec to make the thing that gives me proper account abstraction for privacy and for the things I'm doing, and then I would use it, and that's it. And it's much more direct, and it's a nicer design for engineers and architects. Yeah,
that's what we've done.
Yeah.
We gotta play the defense for 47. Like the 7, they avoid protocol level change, which does make sense for Ethereum, right? But I do agree, like introduce a lot of problem, like fixed cost, right? Every time, like deployment, simulation, execution, and the entry point stuff. But yeah, I do agree, like layer 2s are like a more native way approaching that. But like I feel like every one of you have very different approach to implement the account abstraction. Like, what do you think the interoperability of the smart contracts account to like cross-chain? Is it an issue right now? Like, what do you think of that?
It's an issue.
Yeah. So hard question for you. I'm still figuring out like how can you do that?
Well, I mean, it depends on, I think, what properties you're looking for between interoperability, right? Because if you're just talking about all these different protocols messaging each other, already that's very problematic. Most of these protocols, at least from my understanding of all their architectures, we could send messages through Ethereum to talk to each other more trustlessly and permissionlessly, but that is very slow and arduous and expensive. And then, secondarily, if you're talking about more, external bridging, that's also problematic because they don't share necessarily the same context around verification or state. And so account abstraction doesn't really, in my opinion, doesn't really solve that. Like, it might enable someone to better use some bridging at some point in the future that, like, maybe could bring these things into the fold, but I think at least from the layer 2 perspective, I think every layer 2 has a great way to cross-communicate within its own architecture and within their own architectures, but not between architectures. We basically have to rely on a bunch of multi-sig degenerate bridges to allow us to talk to each other. Yeah.
I think it's separate from account abstraction. Like, I don't think account abstraction makes it worse. Actually, maybe, as you said, makes it a little bit better.
Yes.
But that's a separate problem. I think one of the complexities with account abstraction is like the wallet support, right? Like, if you have something that is very standardized, like right now you have CDSA signature, you can reuse a lot of the same things. and also reduce possibility of bugs. Like if you think about like potential downsides of account abstraction, is that you introduce like very heterogeneous ways of doing things, and it's the complexity comes on the kind of like not at the protocol level, but at the level of wallets and whoever needs to support, and how do you move from one wallet to another, and does it support the keys that I'm interested in, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think just to maybe build on that, the main issue I see is that there's not a standardization between protocol level implementations. So if you're Argent and you want to have a UX across different L2s, there's probably 4 different implementations right now. So maybe to try and strongman 4337, it's not the right interface, but at least it's trying to define an interface. So maybe there's some work to do on trying to make at least the interface of account abstraction look similar on protocol implementations, so a wallet can have an easier time implementing that.
Yeah, I know like for the 7, they have a 6900. It's a standardized kind of interface for like a validation execution, right?
Yeah, so like if you were to implement account abstraction on contract level, you probably have to deploy the same contract, smart contract wallet on every single chain. And that's like a huge problem, I would say. For example, if you want to have like a multi-sig on Ethereum with like address, with a specific address, you probably wouldn't get the same address on other chains. And this causes issue if someone wants to send funds to you. You have to specify like your chain-specific address on like Polygon or on Ethereum, and I think that's a very bad UX. People can send funds wrongly very easily in this way. Yeah.
I would maybe push back a little bit on that. I think to avoid confusion, sometimes it's good if like your chain-specific address is very different, so you don't confuse. I'm sending funds like on Polygon or Ethereum or Taiko or whatever other network. I would say like maybe it's like if you're and it's difficult across EVM-based chains because there you will have addresses looking the same. But another, like in our case, for example, on Miden, the addresses are much shorter. Like they're like physically look different, so you can't confuse an address of Miden with an Ethereum address. And it has its own like downsides and its own pluses where you can like by mistake use a network that you didn't intend.
Yeah. Like, okay, can I just add on? Like, so if let's say you attach an ENS address to ENS name to a specific address, it wouldn't like match to the other addresses on other chains.
Yeah.
I do think though, maybe just to speak about one thing in terms of interoperability. So, in terms of more sort of like cutting edge or advanced ideas around how a user might be able to interact with, say, ZK Sync, then Fuel, then Aztec, then Taiko, then Miden, right? It's basically that at some point, wallets shouldn't really care about the chains, necessarily speaking. So eventually, you would want to get to a point where, for the user itself, these chains are really just infrastructure, and it would be like asking the same kind of question, like if I'm using Slack, like, do I know all the AWS servers I'm pinging? No. Have I looked? Yes. And it's horrifying. But the main thing is the user doesn't care. The user just wants to get things done.
You shouldn't care about that.
Right. So not to bring up intents into this whole conversation, because it'll get even worse. Yeah. But basically, the whole idea is that the user should basically express what they want, and it should be able to be rendered by either them or another party on different networks. And account abstraction, whether it's 4337 or something native or something different, should be able to enable that. So in the future, hopefully and ideally, I think wallets or whatever interface you're using should just abstract all this away, and it will just find the best paths and channels to move things around. I think the issues we struggle with is just that everyone is in a giant liquidity war over the same, I don't know, $1 trillion or whatever, half $1 trillion. And so interoperating liquidity really sucks between everything. And so fundamentally, as much as we'd like everyone to be able to use everything and the projects to be able to gain the benefit of that, the limitation is just that liquidity is currently fragmented, but I do think account abstraction will address some of these other issues. So you can just put your intention out, and things will just resolve eventually. Yeah.
I feel like I do have a question. Another further question is that should a smart contract account leave the ecosystem? For example, the ZK Sync, right? Inside of your ecosystem, you have ZK Porter, which is like a much better user experience and cheaper for the end user. You have a ZK even roll up, and then all the account can communicate with each other seamlessly. But inside of your ecosystem, that shouldn't be a problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, the ZK Porter is an orthogonal issue. Mm-hmm. Because here, with account abstraction, we're talking about the way of, let's say, authenticating, simplifying just the signature. The ZK Porter versus normal accounts is more about whether the data makes it to L1 or whether it uses a separate DA.
DA off-chain.
Yeah, so there's this little bit orthogonal thing. When it comes for, kind of just to finish on the previous point, when it comes to interoperability, mm-hmm. On one side, you can also say that this is almost orthogonal.
Yeah.
But I do believe that what Nick was saying is true, is that the hope is that, yes, people like Argent, people like Clave, if they want to support multiple chains, they will have to do different implementations, because if each of our chains is doing the different thing. But the hope is that from the user perspective, it will be the same. The user will be whichever chain they're using, they use the same, okay, put my finger here, type my password, or use the Face ID, whatever. And it will sign on whatever chain. So it will avoid the situation where some chains right now are using this signature, these chains are using this signature, let's say your hardware wallet might be compatible with this but not with that. So that's one thing that account abstraction could help with when it comes to interoperability on the user request level.
Yeah.
Not necessarily on transferring funds, because that's also a separate issue.
For sure, that shouldn't be the user's responsibility to know all the terms and figure out what kind of infra I want to go to, right? I feel like there's so many exciting things about account abstraction that for example, the Clave, the sponsor of this event, the Clave team, they can enable you to use the passkey to seamlessly interact with the blockchain. There's a lot of, I would say a paymaster or some possibility that you can allow other party to pay the gas for you. So people really don't need to understand why I should pay extra fee for every transactions, right? So what do you think? What's the exciting things or the thing that could possibly bring better user experience in the field by AA?
Right. So here, this is kind of the main motto, why we're getting through all this pain of account abstraction. Why are we making our protocols far more complex rather than saying, here's it's a signature, just use it and be done. So
why that matters? Yeah.
Because users are used to Web 2.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you go to Google and search, it actually costs Google money, but it doesn't charge you 2 cents. It doesn't say, hey, hello, can you pay me 1 cent now? Mm-hmm. You want to see maps? Okay, there's going to be 2 cents. People are more used to the fact that things are free.
Yeah.
And it's very hard, it's extremely hard to change from free to pay even a fraction of a cent. At the same time, blockchain started from a completely different angle. It started from saying everything costs.
Yes.
User pays. So now we're trying to bridge this gap by introducing all these paymasters saying yeah, user pays, but if you don't want to pay, we're going to have this paymaster, and after some conditions, this guy's going to pay.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of what we're slowly introducing, kind of hammering it a little bit onto the system. And the whole 4437, how it can get nicely gelled into it. It's still sticking out. But yes, the hope is that this will really make users more, I would use the word welcome, but more have their experience similar to the Web 2 experience.
I do feel like this is a really important lesson that people should pay for their data or their transactions, because I was asking my friend to say do you ever think about why you can access the Web 2 app for free? They were they're free. I don't know why, because they're monetizing your own data, right? Everybody have a back end closed and they using your data do the advertising, but people didn't aware of that, and people feel oh, I shouldn't pay for anything. Even for Web3, you own your own data, everything's on chain, a decentralized blah, 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 but people don't really care about it and they don't necessarily understand it. It's interesting. If you gotta keep the gatekeeping experience, that would be really hard.
I mean, there's this saying, like, if you don't pay for it, you're not the user, you're the product.
Yeah, yeah. You should put that slogan here. Yeah. True.
I think on the fees side of things, the whole model right now is that someone has to pay for the transaction, and it's always, in 4337, it's an account. If you have full kind of account abstraction, you could say the application has to pay for the transaction. So if you don't enshrine at the protocol what a fee means, you just say, by the end of this transaction, someone has to have paid the sequencer some money, and not enshrine it in the protocol. Then let's say you're doing a Uniswap interaction. From the user's point of view, everything's free. It gets to a Uniswap contract, and the Uniswap contract's like, okay, I'll take some protocol fees, and I'll pay the sequencer as well. So you actually can start to recreate that model where the app pays if you have full fee abstraction in your account abstraction, which I think can start to help at least make apps pay, which I think is where we need to get to.
I think from my standpoint, like one of the best things about account abstraction or why we want them is to provide like extra safety and security to the user. Mm-hmm. You can build different types of wallets where, let's say you can introduce rate limiting, where even if your key is stolen, like you have a hot key and stolen, at most they can withdraw, let's say, 5% per day of your funds, and then you have time to run to your cold wallet and like reset the key or something like that. So you're not as worried about like everyday interactions because there is like a recourse for most things. And this is just one example. There's a ton of other ways in which you can protect and make sure that even if you screw up, there is a way to kind of come back from that and not lose all your funds. That's like one of the biggest pluses in my mind for account abstraction.
Security and user experience.
Yeah, I would say. So I'd say there's a few things. One is, the user right now doesn't really know how they're going to protect against themselves. And basically, most people in the room, your biggest enemy in crypto is yourself, because you're going to forget something, you're going to screw something up, you'll send something to the wrong place, you'll approve the wrong transaction, and you'll lose all your crypto. And so really, you're your own enemy. And account abstraction at least allows us to do some fail-safes. Like daily withdrawal multisigs, or different signing methods that basically give you a different reality altogether with crypto. So like, Satoshi picked this curve, the SEPC P256K1, it's like Koblitz curve. Mm-hmm. I think, call it NSA. They didn't like the other curves because they thought the NSA had some backdoor in them. It probably doesn't, but I'll let the crypto people debate that one. But in doing so, he picked a curve that wasn't really standard, wasn't in every device, wasn't actually used across the entirety of the internet infrastructure, and thus relegated most of crypto's user experience to something really inaccessible. And now we're just waking up to the fact that everyone in the room is actually carrying a very secure production-grade hardware wallet in there right now in your pocket, and it's just your secure enclave in your phone, which supports that other key signing type. And it just shows you where crypto has never really met the road in terms of, it's been this alternate financial system, but it hasn't really been user-focused at all. So right now, I would say that at least in the sense of account abstraction, we can at least try as developers to protect the users more against themselves. It's not even hacks at this point, because that's like a whole other thing. Just themselves. And so I think a lot of the next few years should really just be about every protocol trying to protect the user from themselves and make crypto into something that doesn't feel terrifying to use on a regular basis, basically. Yeah.
Sure.
It lets you meet Web 2. Like, I think for a while we've been saying, like, Apple's going to add the SEPC256K1 curve to the enclave. Well, that's kind of relying on one party to solve crypto adoption, whereas, like, account abstraction lets us just go and implement the stuff that already exists everywhere. So, yeah, let's meet Web 2 where it is so we can get adoption.
Yeah. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I can add something. So, someone has to pay for all the fees. So, I think majority of the users in Web 2, they pay basically nothing up to this point, and getting someone to pay like nothing to like a fraction of cent is like almost impossible, I think. Yeah, so we have to extract all of these fees away. And I think one of the use cases of account abstraction that will blow really big will be in terms of gaming. Because, like, for example, if you play like an RPG game and if you get this item you get this item like a loot, basically. You don't want to pay like 1 cent to just receive this item on chain. You just want to receive this item into your inventory. So yeah, I guess account abstraction in this case will help this Web3 gaming grow.
Yeah, it definitely improves a lot of like user experience and security instead of like GameFi or like SocialFi, etc. Yeah. So do you think like when you talk about like a multisig, do you think so MPC is basically splitting the key into shares, right? And it's splitting the responsibility to different parties, and you can like have a recovery scheme. But what if we have like a smart contract account, like can enable you to, from the contract level, to implement that? Do you think that should they work together or?
So I'm very opinionated about this. I wrote a book a long time ago about how to use multisigs for Ethereum, which was a long time ago. It was with the first Gnosis contract, not the current Gnosis safe, but the one before. Mm-hmm. And in that book, I described one particular kind of setup, which I think basically right now, if you're using crypto and you're not using a multisig, you're doing it wrong, basically. If you're using a single account right now to secure funds, if they're funds you want to lose, that's okay. But if they're not, you're not doing it right. MPC is better because you can shard the key into a few pieces, and then you can recover those pieces, and you can have different recovery schemes. But MPC is not good enough because it doesn't have properties of upgradability or extensibility that you would typically want. And what I mean by that is with a smart contract wallet, like you can add more properties, more spending conditions, etc. So, I think like Marcin already talked about with ZK Sync, people are already doing really exotic, weird things, right, with account abstraction. People want to do a lot more with what they have. And really, I think the default setup for every human being on planet Earth should be most likely something like a 2 of 3 multisig, at least, to start, with daily withdrawal. And so the biggest property that I don't see used anywhere, which is the most important property of a multisig, is the daily withdrawal. And I'll explain why. With MPC, if you have 2 of 3 keys, right, and let's say you lose 2 keys, because guess what? Humans, they're going to lose 2 keys. What's going to happen? Most people in the room, you're going to lose 2. Then what do? You only have 1 shard, so you can't recover anything. Now you're screwed, right? The daily withdrawal gives you something very, very nice, which is effectively the ability to use 1 key to slowly get all your funds back. So if you have fungible tokens, etc., you can slowly get them back with 1 key. Now, if the 1 key gets hacked, any one of them, then you can use the other 2 to swap it out. And so the 2 of 3 model is the ultimate model. It's the one that everyone should use. But basically, no one's done it because, again, you're dealing with a lot of engineers who don't have any experience building products or user experience. And so effectively, only these realizations are happening now in 2023 when we could have told you this in 2016. So yeah, I think MPC is good, but I think smart contract wallets are better. Or in my case, predicates and smart contract wallets. So they just have a nicer property. Yeah.
They're far more flexible. That's the main advantage.
Exactly. Far more flexible.
You can like implement exactly MPC within.
Yes.
And more. Right?
And rotation. Yeah.
Yep.
Correct. So you're bullish on like multisig on like a smart contract level.
I think I'm just bullish on a more flexible way to create accounts that can give me at least a 2 of 3 multisig. And so with daily withdrawal, because the daily withdrawal is really, really important. And if you don't have it, you end up in a situation where like I know most people will lose 2 keys, and at least you give them some way to eventually get all their money back, which is sort of the ultimate OG setup, if you could say. So I would say that without protocols actually having facility for that as smart contracts or at the account abstraction level, your protocol basically shouldn't be used by most consumer people ever. Yeah.
Isn't that just trying to get people to learn a new type of security mechanism, though? Like, we have 2FA in most of our lives. Like, why don't we implement that instead of a MPC? Like, why don't we have kind of like a normal key plus a 2FA text? It could be one of the RSA little number generators. Like to me, that feels like it's easier for the user to understand because they're already doing it, rather than being like, I've got these 3 keys that I need to kind of keep safe, and they've never had to do that before. So
I agree with you.
I don't know if it's the ultimate.
But I think the flexibility is the important part, right? Because people can come up with various different models. Like, I'm imagining, like, for example, you can have a family wallet where I have one key, my wife has a key. Like, there's a daily limit on how much I can withdraw with one key, but sometimes we need to make a big purchase, and if we both sign at the same time, you can withdraw more or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like a myriad of different models that make it much more user-friendly and things like that. So if you leave enough of the room for people to innovate, they will come up with things we can't even think about.
Yeah, and there is going to be a right balance for everybody, and it will likely be some variation of a multi-factor setup of some kind. I agree, like 2FA and some of these other methods are more typical, but I do think that crypto is a little more odd and a little more special, and I feel like when you really weigh the pros and cons, you just want to set people up with something that you know they can fuck it up, and it's going to be okay. And basically, whether that's you and your partner, or you and like a lawyer, or you and someone else, or a bunch of people, or a group, or a company, you want to retain self-custody and still stay true to the values of like what I believe are mainly Ethereum values and these other things that we have. You still want to retain that, but you also want people to be able to use this stuff. And so, it's very, very important. Yeah.
Yeah, it also depends on like end user, right? Like whether the scenario, whether it's like you have a like huge money in your pocket, or like you just interact with GameFi, which is like totally fine with.
But this is actually an important point. Is we have to remember that users will travel over the spectrum. Someone will start, will be like, yeah, I'm just playing with some small games, whatnot, and over time they will be like, okay, now they are more interested, whatnot. So we have to make sure that all the solutions we're talking about, it's amazing because it's exactly what account abstraction is about. So that we can, people can pick what they want. 2FA, cool, but you have billions. Maybe you want to have something stronger than a 2FA on a phone, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about giving people a good starting point and then allowing them to evolve their setup.
Right.
There is a few companies that were trying to do this, I think primarily with Bitcoin, which is why most of the people in the room don't have any idea. Casa, I think is what it's called. Really interesting model. And they basically start the user off with something basic for a setup, something low, easy to start. But they have a plan for how things grow over time and how your setup grows in complexity. So like for billions, you probably want at least like a 3 of 5 multi-sig, something like that. Most companies use that style of signing. But as you go down to the millions, or as you go down to the thousands or even the hundreds of dollars, it's like maybe one key is fine if you don't care about losing $100. But it should grow over time. But I do think that before, we could only do smart contract wallets. So basically that's the only option you had, was basically to deploy these smart contract wallets, which again, for most users is very prohibitive unless you make it free or inexpensive, etc. So 4337 at least tries to bridge the gap between what we had, which was accounts and contracts and smart contracts, and deploying them. But I do think that these things are so integral to most protocols and blockchains that each protocol should enshrine something that really does the job very, very efficiently, and not necessarily use this 4337 kind of stuff. You can support it, support whatever you want, but just, I think it's so important what we're describing here to the whole thing of crypto succeeding, that every protocol should do whatever it takes. Don't follow 4337. Do something else. Like, do a bunch of things, because it's like, we're going to need a lot more experimentation and like access to account abstraction than what we have now. That would be my hunch.
Right. Okay, I think we got like a 5 minute left. So like any question from the audience, we can take like 1 or 2.
The audience was so impressed.
Yeah, they're just in shock. They're in shock by the alpha. Yeah.
Anyone? Okay. Please.
Oh, we got one hand way back there. Does someone have a mic? Oh, okay.
Behind you.
So you were talking about losing and recovering your funds, or like 2 out of your 3 keys. But what about a more adversarial setup? So how? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the crypto space has spent a lot of time thinking about how we can technically enable the possibility of account abstraction, but they haven't thought about what do you do when you actually get there. What do you do when you actually get to this place where, okay, table stakes, account abstraction, everyone's got it, right? And really, I think that you need to do some kind of gradient. So if you are someone who's super more cypherpunk in their values and their nature, then maybe you do want a more extreme setup with more things to get in the way, so that from an adversarial perspective, there's basically less an attacker can do to you. But if you're just a normal, regular user, you probably want to start them off with something basic and then grow that over time. And so, effectively, I think there's many different ways to approach the problem, and I think a lot of the wallets and protocols are trying different things. But if you want a super adversarial setup, then you're going to like a 3 of 5 or like a 5 of 8 or something like that, and then you're looking at how diverse or how aggressive your threat model is and trying to assess it that way. Most people in the room don't think that way. They don't care about any of that stuff. They just want to know funds safe. Funds can be used.
Yeah.
I'm good. So really, most people don't think in threat models. But I do think the community can do an enormous amount of work on really good middle grounds of threat models for the average person all the way through to someone who's got a lot of money, and basically standardize that. So, a lot of what Fuel does, which is very strange because we're a scaling company, like our mission statement is just make blockchains usable. That's it.
That's a wonderful point.
Yeah, because they're not. But basically, threat models and other things are going to be the way that you derive your setup. And account abstraction will enable us to have a better experience with that setup. So hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we might gotta end up here, but do you guys have anything to add on, or
Right. So the thing I would say is look, we've been here for 50 minutes explaining you all the pain we've been going through and all the promise the account abstraction can bring. But now, one thing is that actually account abstraction is not that popular.
Yeah.
If you look right now, and I'll be talking more about this in my talk later, but it's not that popular. We're talking small percentages. It's also up to all of us to start promoting it, to start actually using it, to start building it. So we don't only delegate to Clave, Argent, and let them figure it out, but as Nick was saying, there is the whole spectrum.
Right.
Let's put more things on the spectrum so that users have more choice. Thank you.
I guess my favorite part of the spectrum is the part where there's no authentication. There's this world of non-accounts where if you have a contract with a function that just anyone can call, it opens up some pretty interesting possibilities of kind of worker accounts or things that maybe they give people game state, as you were saying earlier. So it's not just about users having their accounts. If you fully abstract it, there's this kind of whole other world of non-authentication, which is quite exciting.
I mean, it's been said before, but I think we need to start using it because without account abstractions and without people actually using it, there is not going to be mass adoption. And that's we're looking maybe at a few million people using crypto without this. And if we want to get to billions, that's
right.
a basic requirement.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, if people aren't using it, then maybe it's just not good enough right now.
Right.
Yeah, so we still have a long way to go, probably.
Yeah, I spoke a lot, but effectively, I just want people to use it. And as well, I think a lot of people right now have their own setup, and they're terrified of switching. And so I understand, and you should be terrified of switching, and that's great because you're in the crypto industry. But ideally, everyone should be starting to experiment with what the possibilities are and trying to define what good looks like for user experience. And ideally, what good looks like, and what I believe is just table stakes, is I don't want to pay stupid fees and random tokens. I don't want to have my funds go away and be lost or stolen. And I don't want it to be annoying to use. I just want to use it, and I want it to work, and so I can gain all the benefits of what crypto is really doing, which is providing this really alternate, financial system with a different set of values. I want the whole planet to access that. But if I have to install something, if I have to explain something, if I have to even slightly understand something, you've just lost 1 billion people.
Right.
Easily, you've just lost 1 billion people. And by the way, most people in the world don't really like crypto. They don't know anything about it, and they don't like it, and it's very confusing. So the last thing we need is this thing where they like it, they understand it, they're coming to it, they're trying to use it, and then it's all horrible. And then they go, oh, okay, well, then I guess not. So really, it's like the most important thing, because like these teams will get the cost down, and we'll make it private, and we'll make it incredible, right?
Right.
But if the user can't actually enjoy it from the start to finish and really feel confident in it, there's very little chance that like most people will interact with crypto in the real way. Maybe through a company, but no one wants that. You get an FTX situation happening, so we don't want that.
The way I would summarize it, like imagine if computers stopped at MS-DOS.
Yeah.
That's it, no Windows, MS-DOS. How much popular they would be right now. And that's the situation we are with the current versus the account abstraction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indeed, I feel like all of you will take care of the infrastructure, and there's a call of action that all the builders can build, whether it's wallet or the D app or this like a wallet as service SDKs that on those layer 2. That would be great. And I think all the efforts and the thing you sacrifice for improving the whole experience in security will open us a door for the mass adoption in the future. Okay, so thank you so much to be here today. I hope you guys gain a lot of thing about account abstraction. Let's go have this conversation going. Okay, thank you.